Hi all, yes, welcome to episode 2, and in this episode I was really lucky enough to have a chat with a retired nurse, Pauline, who used to work in our Builth Cottage Hospital. She worked there for 32 years, and I had a fascinating conversation with a cup of coffee and some Welsh cakes at my Nana Jungle's house a couple of weeks ago. Enjoy the episode. Ta-ra now, bye. Pauline, I can't thank you enough for meeting with me today. It's always, as I said many times when I'm on the hill, walking up and down the hill, and you saw my mother's interview. Yes. It's always great to capture people's knowledge and history of what they remember about Builth. And having a chat with yourself around the history of the hospital is fascinating. So my first question for you, really, Pauline, is how did you get into nursing?
Well, I got into nursing because my father was in the army and we went all over the world with him. We were living in North Africa in the desert and I had appendicitis. And in those days, they kept you in hospital for a fortnight afterwards. Yeah. And when I was there, I would be about coming up to 17 at the time. The nurses used to let me do the flowers and give out the teas. I thought, this is good. This is being a nurse. Yeah. And when we came back to England or to Wales, everyone was saying to me, what are you going to do? So I thought, perhaps I'll be a nurse, do the flowers, give out the teas. I didn't realise you had all these other awful jobs to do. And I was sort of more or less pushed into it then. When we came back from Africa, my parents went on to Germany and I was left in Cardiff with my grandmother. And she and my aunt sort of pushed me into it. And before I knew it, hey presto, I was there.
You were in training. Where did you train then?
In those days, you could start at 17 and do orthopaedics. You did 2 years orthopaedics, and then you went into your general training as a second-year nurse. So you did 4 years, and you had orthopaedic and your SRN. And it was a wonderful... the hospital I went to in Cardiff is no longer there. It's called the Prince of Wales Orthopaedic Hospital, Rydlava. And it was a wonderful hospital. So
from your training then, how did your journey take you to Builth then, Pauline? How did that?
Oh, Simon, it was a very roundabout route. I married an Englishman and went to live in England. But we came to Wales for all our holidays to my family. Yes. And I managed to persuade him to come. And the reason we came to Builth was most of my family live in Carmarthenshire or near Cardiff. And my brother was living in Hereford, and we were sort of in the middle of it. And we loved the countryside around here.
Well, that's a big, massive positive for us, isn't it? And it's actual fact sometimes when I have friends coming up to see me from cities, they just stop and they stare, and you're thinking, yeah, I get that. Yeah. I get it, because we are privileged where we live, Pauline, aren't we?
You know, another thing about it, I have a friend who used to come and stay with us regularly, and she used to get quite annoyed. She used to say, the trouble with this town is it's at least 20 years behind the times. We said, that's what we like about it.
Yeah.
You know, it is behind the times. People stop and talk to you.
Yeah, it's what we love about Builth Wales.
Exactly.
And I suppose then, the next question, your first memories then, Pauline, of working your first day in Builth Hospital, what was that like? Do you remember?
Yes, I'm trying to remember, it was in 1981.
Yes.
I'm trying to think. It was a busy hospital in those days.
Yes.
I mean, we had 2 wards, a men's ward, a women's ward, a maternity ward, a labour ward, 24-hour accident and emergency department, 365 days a year, outpatients. We did everything there. It was absolutely wonderful. But the thing that I liked about it, being in a small town, you got to know everybody. You got to know the patients, their families, the rest of the staff and their families. It was almost like a big family unit.
Yeah. And I always sensed that. Yeah. Growing up in Builth.
Yeah.
It's just, it was that added connection for us, wasn't it? We all knew each other, and it was all like a very...
Yes.
Sometimes you have to go down, and obviously you have worries and concerns, but straight away, because of that connection that you're talking about, and the surrounding where we live, everybody was put at ease. Did you find that yourself?
Absolutely. And in the summer, we'd often get people from away who were at the Royal Welsh. they would have an accident or some illness, and they'd be brought to Builth Hospital. They thought it was wonderful. They said it was just like being in a private hospital, which you don't get in these other hospitals.
Yeah, and I suppose with working on, have you got any funny stories that you remember on the ward, or can you say? Or
Oh, well, I've got one very funny. Talking of having casualty going 365 days a year, there was one gentleman who shall be nameless.
Okay.
He came to us one Christmas morning with some minor injury, and we happened to give him, just before lunch, we gave him a Christmas dinner. And I don't think his wife was much of a cook. So then, for several years afterwards, he always turned up on Christmas morning, late in the morning, with some sort of very minor illness or injury, so he knew we'd give him his Christmas dinner.
Oh, yeah. He knew, that says a lot about your Christmas dinners, isn't that?
Yeah, he came for Christmas dinner. And of course, I mean, in those days, all the cooking was done there at the hospital. They weren't imported meals like they have nowadays. And it was just like home cooking. It was wonderful.
Yes.
You know, because the staff could have food as well as the patients. It was absolutely wonderful.
And I suppose then when you first heard that the hospital was going, for yourselves and the staff at that time, it must have been
I'd been long retired then, Simon, but I still felt very attached
to
it.
As we all did.
Yeah, very much. And the fact we were told we were going to have another hospital...
Yeah.
You know, Glenavon, which isn't really a hospital at all.
Yeah.
It's more of a convalescent place.
Yeah. It was, so when did you retire from nursing?
Oh, now you're asking me. I'm 83 now, and I retired when I was 49. 59, 69. So that's about 34 years ago I retired.
So put it another way, how long were you a nurse for? How long were you?
A nurse?
Yeah.
From when I was 17 until I was 49.
So over 30 years?
Yeah. And I only gave up then because of my back. I couldn't, carry on.
So what were you a sister of the ward at the end there, or?
Yes, I was a senior sister in the hospital when I retired. I was on the ward on a Sunday afternoon, and I suddenly heard someone screaming in the hall below. And I looked over the banister, and there was a man there. And he said, "My wife is dying, she's dying, come." And the story was, there was two couples. They'd been to North Wales to a wedding the day before. And on the way back, on the outskirts of Builth, she had an asthma attack. Well, we quickly manhandled her. We just got her out of the car. She was absolutely dark blue. And I said to one of the nurses on the ward, I said, "Bring the doctor on call to come immediately." And we got her into outpatients and put an airway in, which didn't do much good because the airways are all... So I quickly drew up the stuff that the doctor needed to give her to get her breathing again. Unfortunately, the doctor on call lived down the road. He was here immediately. We gave her these injections and she quickly recovered. So we hadn't got any beds, so as they were from Cardiff, we sent her to Addysgu Hospital. But I mean, if that hospital hadn't been there, she would have died because she wouldn't have made it anywhere else.
Yes. It
was really life and death. She was stopping breathing, then she would have stopped breathing altogether. And if that hospital hadn't been there, she wouldn't have lived. And funnily enough, about a fortnight later, somebody came upstairs and said, "There's a gentleman and lady downstairs asking for you." I said, "Put them in the waiting room." When I went down, I said, "I'm sorry to keep you waiting. What can I do for you?" And the lady said, "Well, you saved my life." And this couple, they'd come up from Cardiff just to say thank you. And I remember they bought 3 little travelling alarm clocks, one for me, one for the doctor, and one for the nurse that helped. Because often once people had gone, we never heard what happened to them. But the fact they'd taken the trouble to come all the way back from Cardiff to thank us. But if that hospital hadn't been there, she would have died.
I know, and it's just to think that it's gone now.
Yeah, in the same circumstances, that somebody would just die. They wouldn't make it to Landrindad Hospital.
There's a generation of my generation that were actually born in Builth Hospital.
Yeah,
and you know, that's gone now. You know, it's a strange thing to think. As you said to me, it's lovely to see the houses, Pauline, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I would love. How would you? You know, it would be nice to see that.
We used to have a visiting consultant from Addysgu. He was a very smart man. He always wore a 3-piece suit with a waistcoat and a tie. And we were in the office one day talking, and one of the doctors came up the drive in his jeans and sweatshirt. And the consultant said, "Oh, there's Dr. So-and-so." I said, "Oh, yes, he's come from surgery." And he said, "What? Dressed like that?" Because he had his T-shirt and jeans on. He was horrified. Dressed like that. He was a really, good old-fashioned doctor. Oh.
Thanks for that one, Pauline.
They were the good old days.
They were the good old days. Thank you, Pauline.
Yeah.
Talking to me now, you were just saying...
Well, we're talking to you now. I can just visualise every bit of Builth Hospital. I suppose I haven't thought about it much over the years because it's so long since I retired. But talking to you now, it's all very fresh. I can visualise everything there.
Wonderful memories, Pauline.
Wonderful memories.
And on that positive note of you remembering, I can't thank you enough for taking time to have a chat to me about Builth Hospitals and your memories of nursing. It's been, thank you so much, Pauline.
Simon, I just feel we've been getting off the subject a lot and talking about things.
I tell you what, people have walked up there with me, we've randomly got off the subject lots, so don't worry. Thank you very, very much.
Well, not at all. It was a wonderful life. It was a wonderful place to work at. And wonderful companionship. And even now, several of us still meet up for coffee and talk about the old days. Yeah.
No, I'm very sincere. Thank you, Pauline. As I've said, I've encouraged local people to share memories around. I've had Jimmy Price from Thunel. We're talking about Builth Football Club as he remembers it in the 50s, 60s and 70s, which is a fascinating conversation. I've talked to musicians and now I've talked to a past sister from Builth Hospital.
Oh, I hope it's been useful to you.
No, of course it has, and I'm very grateful. Now, I know my mother is waiting to have another cup of tea with you. I catch up even more.
Well, I hope we're going to the Drovers for an
You go for Drovers, are you?
all-day breakfast.
Right.